first deal I wanted to ask you about was Mason Mount and United's pursuit of him, because we saw the second bid rejected. But there are lots of talks today that although Chelsea have rejected the second bid, that they're actually softening on their initial sort of stance of 75 to 80 million, and a deal nearer the 60 million pound mark could get done. What's your understanding of how close that deal is to completing or being agreed for Man United and Mason Mount?
Yeah, I mean, United have always expected that Chelsea would have to come down from their valuation of Mason Mount. There's no bidding war here at the moment. I mean, when we first started the Mason Mount stories a few months back, Arsenal were in the picture, Liverpool were in the picture, Newcastle were in the picture, and you were thinking, well, Chelsea have got themselves in a pretty good position here, and they might get themselves a little bit of a tug of war between a couple of clubs and fighting over who can actually get Mason Mount. But as it is, Man United the only team in the picture right now. So why would United really go to where Chelsea wanted them to get? It was 50 million, including add-ons, which is what I was expecting. So I was pleased that turned out to be the bid that went in. I personally think that that's fair, given the contract situation. From Man United's point of view, they're like, well, you didn't give him the contract that you feel he's worth. Like this is the strange thing about the situation. Like Chelsea didn't value him highly enough to actually offer him a contract that would keep him in the first place. So how can they continue to say he's worth a certain amount of money that they were never willing to back up themselves? Mason Mount in a pretty tricky situation if this drags on much longer. And so are Chelsea. I think Man United's stance now is whether they even need to rush. They're a bit torn. Ten Hag himself wants a signing confirmed as soon as possible. Now, I don't think personally that Mason Mount is a massive game changer in terms of how Man United's season is looking for next year. But it is important that they bulk up this squad and they start making signings. And Ten Hag obviously needs that. So to have Mason Mount through the door from his personal point of view is important. From a Man United business point of view, they're thinking, well, we don't want to rush this unnecessarily because we're putting Chelsea in a situation here where they're going to have to sell the player. We're only 2 weeks away from players returning to pre-season training. And as somebody put it to me the other day, what did Chelsea do if they get the players coming back in at Cobham and Mason Mount's still there? It suddenly puts them in an awkward situation. And then like a week and a half after that, when they all first meet up, they're going off on their pre-season tour. Mason Mount definitely shouldn't be part of that. I mean, they've made pretty clear that there's no contract going to be signed here. So it all starts to become a bit more complicated.
Yeah.
So the intention has always been that Mason Mount would have his future sorted out during this like holiday period. And that holiday period is starting to run down a little bit. So I do think another offer will go in, but I don't think that Man United are going to get to a set £60 million offer for Mason Mount. Might get there with add-ons, but that would be, related to how successful Man United are, how successful he is individually, and there's no guarantees to ever actually getting to that £60 million mark. And I think that £50 million really is where Man United see this deal hopefully settling out.
Excuse me. Just I wanted to speak. Listen, I get that. I think, as you say, maybe they're softening Chelsea because they realize they're not going to get anywhere near that 75 million mark. Maybe now United go back and offer something with, as you say, some add-ons there. United win some trophies, or there's, two seasons on the bounce qualification for the Champions League with Mount playing a certain amount of games. You get an extra 5 million, something along those lines to be able to get this over the line. But it is an interesting one. He's told Chelsea again he's not going to sign. They don't want to lose him on a free. They've said categorically, Chelsea, they don't want to lose him on a free. Well, I've read reports saying that. So, yeah, it is a real interesting one. Man United fans are also, let's walk away, let's put our money elsewhere. And I get that on a personal preference. But I tweeted something last night, and it goes against things I've said on streams, but my mind's changed. I actually think Mason Mount's going to be a success at Man United. Speaking to Chelsea fans off record is what's key sometimes. Like, what do you actually think, mate? The cameras aren't on. No one's going to judge you in the comment section. What do you think? And straight away, what you see, what you get, what you understand is that Chelsea Football Club, Chelsea fans rate this guy high. A lot of Chelsea fans rate this guy highly, and they are desperate for him, absolutely desperate for him to stay on. Striker-wise, I just want to ask you if there's been any updates or progression on the Højlund situation. I know the noise around Kane's picked up after the international break that he wants to move. Anything new in the striker area for Man United?
I've not heard anything on Kane for sure. I know that that's trying to be brought back to life at the moment. And there was a story about United selling Kane. He would have to hand in a transfer request. At the moment, there hasn't seemed to be any intention from Kane to do that. Højlund, I think, is a really interesting one. I mean, there was a story recently about indications that Atalanta were going to almost price him out of the market at 80 odd million pounds. I mean, that is not the intentions that United had around that player when they first entered any form of negotiation around him. We were literally looking at half of that amount. Now, speaking to people in the last few days, I get the feeling that 60 million pound is probably a reasonable amount to expect. I totally understand why they would be holding out for more for Højlund. Everybody knows United are desperate for a forward. Everybody knows that if you're going to sell to the Premier League, you add on a premium and all the rest of it. But I think Højlund won't go for 80 odd million pounds. I think 60 could do the job. And I think talking of, like I was a second ago about the takeover and the funds available right now, I don't think there's much more than £100 million available without that takeover from what I've been hearing. So realistically, what's the best you can hope for? If it was Mount and Højlund that United could get through, what does it change? And what does it mean for how this team feels in pre-season? Because if the takeover does happen and the big signings come now, it looks like it's going to be right at the back end of this window.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what's going to be important is like, what does this change about United's vision going into the new season? You're a United fan, so you'll have your own feelings and how you'd feel about that. But I mean, if you were thinking about it in May, you were like, right, Harry Kane, we'll go after him. Who's our big midfielder going to be? Is it Lavia? And at one point, you're thinking, is it Frankie de Jong? You're like, well, Mason Mount isn't really what we had in mind. Not sure exactly where he even fits into this team, but okay, we'll take him. Is it settling for just a small upgrade on the squad, or is it making splashes like Arsenal have been trying to make? I mean, that's what I like about Arsenal's business. Whether or not they pull it off, at least they are trying, like seriously trying, to make additions that are going to impact that first team straight away next season.
Yes. No, I understand that completely. I think Mount, I've got a feeling he'll do well, but we need someone who maintains possession in the middle. Højlund, look, he could be one of those signings that comes in and you go, wow, he's much better than I thought. Or he scores maybe an extra 7, 8, 9 goals than predicted. But he looks at this stage, a 15 goal, maybe 20 in all competitions. Like he almost feels like a Chicharito level signing. Does that make sense? In terms of never going to be good enough to by himself to win you help win you a Premier League or a Champions League, but will improve your squad. It's this takeover that's holding Manchester United back. And hopefully there has been some noise in the last few days that it feels like a conclusion is coming. For the first time, we've seen mainstream media come out and say that the Glazer family are all in agreement. They want to sell, but for the right price. So hopefully they get that. Because I think once they announce it, the club can kick on and you'll probably find, I know it might take 12 weeks for the new owners to come in, but you will get almost a go and spend money. We'll fix everything when we arrive almost. So it'll be an interesting one to see what Manchester United do.